Director Edwards.
Here.
Vice Chair Anderson.
Here.
And Chair Adams.
Here. Thank you very much. We're all present. And now let's stand for the Pledge of Allegiance. Follow me. I pledge allegiance
To the flag of the United States of America and to the republic which stands one nation under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
Thank you. Are there any additions or corrections to the agenda?
Yes, Madam Chair, there are three, well, actually two, but I'll mention a third. Exhibit 2A was distributed separately. Those would be the minutes from the August board meeting. Hopefully you've had a chance to review those. Item 19, which is an information only item. Somehow the staff member saved his file from August as September, and we didn't notice it until after the packet was distributed. So that will be repaired and posted with a correct staff note, but it is not in your packet. And just to highlight, the packet includes the calendar of upcoming meetings. It did not include the October 10th special meeting. That's not part of the agenda, but it's in the packet. So I just wanted to mention that.
Great. Thank you very much for that. Okay, moving forward, this is an opportunity now for public comment. If there's anyone who wishes to address the board on any items that are not on today's agenda, please come forward.
Hello. On the mic. Oh, here we go. There. Thank you. Hello, Chris Cook, Director of Operations with California American Water. Thank you, Chair and Board, for the opportunity to speak tonight. I just wanted to address certain comments that have been made in recent board meetings, some related to the conveyance of the water system for maximizing source water, and then as recent as the August 21st meeting, discussion about potentially Calium using more expensive ASR water in lieu of the less expensive Carmel River water. And I think it was a good opportunity to discuss it from my side on operations, which is this water year, immediate actions we're doing. And then I have Tim O'Halloran here too, our engineering manager, to speak to more of the near-term and long-term improvements being done to further maximize those source waters in both Carmel River and Seaside Basin areas. So to start, what I'd say is, the conveyance, you can get into a lot of complexities of infrastructure and other things, but in my mind, it really boils down to wells and production of wells. And for this season, we've had a good ASR season. And what I've conveyed to staff is what we've really looked to do through the end of this water year is try and maximize all the Carmel River production that we can, so that that water that can't carry over, we try and use as much of that as we can, and ASR bank, keep as much bank as possible. Our operations team has put in every effort to be able to do that. One example would be Cypress Well. Over the last couple of months, that's gone down several times with PG&E having significant power fluctuations. We had the VFD go down. We had a spare soft starter that we got. That went out with the power fluctuation. And so then our maintenance team actually took it upon themselves to drive up to Fresno twice to get electrical equipment so that they wouldn't have to wait for the delivery time. And then even as recently as last week, a 700 amp fuse on the well went down because they had a drop in voltage that brought the current up to 3,000 amps. Luckily, that wasn't as significant as the rest, so we were able to keep our electrical. But those are the kind of things they're doing on a daily basis to try and maximize Carmel River production. And what that's resulted in is with the quarterly water budget group, we had a plan of a certain amount of Carmel River pumping for that. Will be less than 100 acre feet over that plan despite those constraints. And then for ASR Bank, will actually be a couple hundred acre feet under the plan for that. So we're really trying to store that ASR Bank and maximize Carmel River to the full extent possible. Tim O'Halloran will speak more to the short-term and long-term improvements we're doing with rehabs and new wells. For the new wells, they're not on our land, so we have a lot of constraints there. The staff here has been very collaborative and supportive of trying to support where they can to help expedite those new well sites. And so with that, I just appreciate the added interest in critical infrastructure and maximizing source water and the desire to collaborate, and appreciate it. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Mr. Cook.
Good evening, Chair and board members. Yeah, I'd just like to give a little update on our well activities to prepare for this ASR season and also extraction season. So we've completed maintenance activities on 6 of our upper Carmel Valley wells, and we plan to complete 4 of our lower Carmel Valley wells. And this maintenance, this is like a little less than a rehab. It's like super cleaning the wells. So it's something we do more often than a rehabilitation. We do plan to complete 2 well rehabs by the end of the calendar year, which will help optimize production out of those wells. And we have drilled the new Schulte well and are working on the above ground improvements and hope to have that online early next year. We're also planning for additional wells, working on well replacement for Carmel Rancho or Rancho Cañada well, and then also Rancho Cañada Village well. So we're working with the developer on that project. We've drilled 4 test wells to determine the appropriate site for the permanent well. We found a site. It's been included on the developer's final map. And so we're moving forward with that well. Hope to have that online early 2025. And then we've been spending a lot of resources the last year permitting and outfitting ASR4 for mercury treatment. So we just got approval from the regulators last week and hope to have that online in the next couple of weeks. And that will really, that'll help us with the loss production that we relied on ASR1 for. And then finally, we're working on 4 new extraction wells as part of pure water expansion. And, that's a partnership with you and with M1W, and we've got a lot of support from the district and support letters to both the Army and the school district. We're working on land acquisition with the school district. Also, we've got approval to do a test well and trying to work through the hurdles with the Army to get approval in their right of entry process. And that's a difficult process, but thank you. And that's it for me.
Thank you. Is there anyone else from the public present who wishes to speak to anything not on today's agenda?
Good evening.
Caller.
This is Nina. Yes, my name is Nina Beatty. I sent to the board this afternoon a letter that the Sierra Club, the California Sierra Club, sent to the Coastal Commission this month. It was in response to a plan by the University of California at Santa Barbara to install artificial turf at one of their baseball fields. And this letter, which was from the Sierra Club and a coalition of groups, was opposing that installation. I sent the letter to you. It has information and research on the environmental hazards and water use, which the district may be unaware of. Right now, the district gives cash incentives to residents and businesses for eliminating grass lawns and replacing them with certain alternatives. And one of the suggested alternatives by the district is artificial turf. So I'm asking you to investigate this. There's been quite a bit of information out about the toxicity of artificial turf. This letter brings it all into focus very nicely. So I request that you do this investigation and discontinue promoting artificial grass or artificial turf because it's not viable, it's not healthy, it's not an environmentally sound solution. Thank you.
Thank you, Ms. Beatty. Are there any other hands raised?
Marley.
Ms. Melton, you're on.
Okay, yes, this is Marley Milton. And I just wanted to thank you for the very good work that has gone into your research and preparations that are the background and the justification for a potential purchase of the Monterey water system from Cal-Am. The most important thing to me is that my children and grandchildren will be able to live here more affordably and have local control over and ownership of public water should that prove feasible and should the board vote to do that. And so I wanted to also thank you for the excellent and work and clarity of the report that you've prepared for all of us. I've just barely begun to read it, but I'm already seeing tens of millions and hundreds of millions in savings to ratepayers, should it prove feasible to move ahead with the acquisition. So thank you very much.
Thank you for your comments.
I see no further hands raised.
All right, thank you very much. I think that we will now be able to close public comment and we'll move forward with our consent calendar. Are there any comments or any member of the board wish to pull or make comments on any of the items on our consent calendar?
I don't want to pull an item, but just make a very, very quick comment on items 3 and 4. And I'm not aware how many members of the public are attending, but I suspect there's more than we had at the Finance and Administration Committee, a meeting just a short while ago. We had no attendees. And I wanted to point out, for the benefit of the public, that I had specifically asked our treasurer to confirm that when we got these monthly interim treasury reports, that in fact, all of those line items were well within the budgeted amounts, and he did in fact confirm that.
Great, good. Thank you for your comment. Anyone else wish to pull something? Mr. Riley?
Yeah, one other comment on item 3 is that I see where the Mechanics Bank loan has been paid and apparently the check cleared. So that was a complete. I just noticed that.
Thank you for bringing that to our attention. Is there any member of the public that wishes to pull anything from today's consent calendar?
I see no hands raised.
There are no hands raised and no one coming forth in chambers. Yes, I'm sorry.
About the treasurers. One question about the treasurer's reports, both of them. Let's see, I'm looking at page 17 of the agenda, Exhibit 3A, the deposits, and it shows Monterey County tax deposits and water supply charge payments, and they are combined into one category. And I was wondering why they are not separate. And Dave, I don't know if you heard, you're probably the person who can answer that question. How come in the treasurer's report, the Monterey County tax income and water supply charge are combined into one category?
Probably because they're both remittances from the treasurer, but we just pull that up.
It's just
Yeah,
wondering.
directors, this is Suresh Prasad, CFO. So basically that is the remittance from the Monterey County Tax Collector's Office. It is the proceeds for the property tax and the water supply charge. Historically, we have reported that as one line item. Going forward, if the board wishes, we can always break that down between the property tax and the water supply charge. But it's just like one line item showing up on our bank account. That's the reason why we've always combined it together as one line item.
And internally, we allocate it to, so
Separately.
we know how much was each, but yeah.
Correct.
Thank you. I don't know if it's necessary to make a change, but we'll leave that for another day. But thank you for explaining.
Thank you, Suresh. Any other comments on the consent calendar? And there are no hands raised, no one coming forward. Could we have a motion to approve the
Move
consent?
approval.
Thank you very much. Is there a second? Thank you. So that's moved by Riley, second by Anderson. All in favor, please signify by saying aye. Any opposed? Hearing none, any abstentions? Great. Okay, thank you very much. With that, we will move forward to our general manager comments. Actually, that's something different. I think we're ready to just go to the general manager.
Well, I have two reports. One has three parts to it, but we'll start with item 5, which is the compliance report on the water resource system. I guess Sarah's getting, there we go. Next slide, please. Next slide, Sarah. Sarah, next slide. All right.
I believe we as board members have the handout in our packets, but that does not work for the public. Oh, and we've got an empty chair.
Empty chair.
Yeah, I guess you have to be a certain age to get the nuance of that comment.
Careful.
For the too, because there's a couple that are animations, but
You should have that.
she didn't have it out.
And so please know that you are not muted, Dave.
You do have a copy in your packet. We'll give Sarah another. There we go.
Hey, there we go.
All right. All I want to point out from this one is the increase from last month and the target under the quarterly water budget was under the Carmel River was 400, and the actual in that period was 305. So we're still a little under budget from the river. And this is through, of course, the end of August. So we have 1 month left. And to Mr. Cook's point earlier, you won't see the full 3,386 acre feet from the river at year end. It's not going to happen. So, but, given everything that's been said about source waters and the improvements in wells, hopefully we'll focus on meeting the legal limit in the future. Next slide, please, Sarah. Well, at least it's a repeatable error. It won't advance. All right, working from your packet, and apologies to the, oh, there we go. Let's
move
instead of running the slideshow, Sarah, let's just click on the, yeah, there we go. The couple of things I want to point out here, if you want to call it good news, the increase in ASR recovery was projected under the quarterly water budget to be 350 acre feet, but it was only 225. So that's a positive, consistent with what Mr. Cook said would be a priority, trying to reduce use of the banked ASR. And Sand City did produce at 21 acre feet during the month. So we've seen some production out of the Sand City desal plant this year. Next slide. This is production for customer service, proxy for demand. There's a few things I want to highlight here. We're 1 month away from the end of the water year. So mid-October, we'll have a little bit better handle on how the year went. But we are currently 401 acre feet lower than last year at this time. Whereas the prior 3 years, we were 58, well, let's see, In 2022, we were 83 acre feet ahead of the prior year. The prior year, we were 38 ahead of the year before that. And in 2020, we were 54 acre feet below the year ahead of that. So it's been a consistent nominal decrease in demand. But if any of this holds at 400 or even 300 acre feet, that'll be a significant difference. You may want to attribute it to, the three conservation reasons. One is the cost of water, which remains high. One is technological change, high efficiency clothes washers, things like that. One is behavioral change. Throw a fourth in there, it could be weather. We had a very gray spring, which moderated a lot of irrigation. But anyway, the point being, it'll be interesting to see how we end up the year. I don't think we would immediately jump on the bandwagon that we're 300 to 400 acre feet better than previously, but we've been very flat for about 7 years. So we're certainly not going up, which is the takeaway. Next slide, please. This is rainfall, nothing to talk about. Next slide. Which is very unfair because it did rain,
I know.
just a week ago, mysteriously. We remain at 35 inches, 35.19, about 170% of long-term average. Next slide. The takeaway here is we're still running at about 300% of long-term average for runoff. So when we finish the water year, it will be interesting to report back in total what it looks like compared to the full year. Currently, storage in the ground is about 100% of long-term average. So really haven't tapped in. So there's no deficit. So that's all good news in terms of compliance and where we're going. Item 7 has 3 parts to it. And we'll see if it pops up on our screen.
Item 6, you mean?
Item 6. Oh, I'm sorry. Item 6. Yes. Great. Next slide. So while this is under the title of activities related to the acquisition of the Monterey water system, there's actually 3 things I need to bring to your attention, this being the first one. Next slide. Yeah, the same problem Sarah had, just no advancing. So maybe just pull it up and just land on the slide without slideshow. Which will just crush me because of all the very high-tech animations. All right. There is a public hearing scheduled on the resolution of necessity for the acquisition of the Monterey water system. That will be October 10th, 2023, 5:30 p.m. on the campus of the Middlebury Institute of International Studies in the Irvine Auditorium. It has its own address, 499 Pierce Street. It's not super obvious where the door is, but you just kind of walk in that general direction and see where all the people are going. There is parking. There's a lot on Ms. that may be open, which is Franklin and Pierce would be the best way to come in on Franklin. The Monterey City Hall lot is only about a half a block away, and the Monterey Municipal lot on Pacific, that's a 2-level lot. The upper deck actually is on the Pacific side, and then you can just walk through the Ms. campus and you're right there at the building. Next slide. A reminder, why are we pursuing this? The concept is, and we'll talk a little bit about what the project is and the public purpose is, but a lower cost to operate, better quality of service, local and more transparent governance, And again, we're not the first ones to invent this concept. 85% of all urban water in California, and frankly, across the country, is provided by public water entities. Next slide. Again, to touch on what we've done to date, took almost a year from the vote. The vote of the public was in November of 2018. Took about a year to demonstrate financial feasibility. Took another year to go through the certification of the environmental impact report and to go through LAFCO. 2 of the 3 asks for LAFCO were certified in late 2021. And then an offer was made in April of 2023. That appraisal effort took a great deal of time in 2022 and 2023. And where we stand today, next slide, is what we call phase 4. And here's where the animations would work really well because that big blue blob wouldn't appear on here. But nevertheless, there are several findings at a very high level that you will be faced with looking at and seeing if the evidence supports those findings. And then there are 83 findings in the attachment or the appendix 2 or B rather of the resolution of necessity. So that's what you'll be looking at. You've already received your packets, and so you know really what a weighty situation this is. I encourage you to read everything you can. You're also going to kind of reaffirm the original EIR that you certified as a underpinning of evidence to this set of findings. And that, again, could result in a vote if you choose to vote on October 10th, or if you choose to defer, will still be the underpinnings of whenever you do come back to consider the resolution of necessity. Next slide. The proposed public use and project, these terms are going to get intermingled from time to time. The proposed public use is converting ownership from private to public. And the project is defined in the resolution of necessity a little more extensively as the acquisition and operation of the Monterey water system by the district, which, if you find such, will be more beneficial to customers with benefits including but not limited to lower cost, better quality of service, and more transparent and responsive governance. So a little bit of a nuance that the project includes benefits rather than just simply the acquisition. That'll have more weight if you do intend to move forward with explanation to the courts that it's not just a change in ownership, but it's a change in benefit to the customer. Next slide. The schedule. Just a reminder to our public that you did weigh the merits, pros and cons of moving to a potential adoption of a resolution of necessity. That was on September 7th. The hearing notice went out to California American on the 11th, last Monday. They had 15 days to indicate whether they wanted to be heard at the hearing. They have done so. And I have a call into, we've exchanged communication with their special counsel about how much time would be allotted to them. I've given them until Thursday of this week to get back to me. And then we'll, if it's not a satisfactory number, it'd be great at 15 minutes. It'd be great at 20 minutes. I think a half hour is kind of stretching things. So we'll see what they ask for. And then you'll have 6 months, if you do approve the resolution, to file a condemnation action, or it will expire. All right, with that, I've got 2 other items I wanted to bring to your attention. The first is a communication from the Naval Support Monterey. Department of the Navy is working on a fabulous concept, Naval Innovation Center. It'll be a massive building. bringing together interdisciplinary work on kind of the next level of where the Naval Service needs to go educationally, technologically into the future. We've been asked by the Navy through Marlena Brown, who's here, if we would serve as a, now my eyesight's going, cooperating agency, thank you, through their environmental process. It's a role that we should embrace, but I just wanted direction from this board before I send them a letter saying absolutely we would do so. Next slide, you can see these are some of the considerations and the design considerations, as well as the environmental resources to be analyzed will include water and resilience and things like that. So from the standpoint of the district's area of expertise, it makes sense to be cooperating and consulting and be a reader and a comment provider to the extent we can. If you have any questions about the project or this request, Marlena is here if you have any interest.
Just have one question. Thank you. Thanks very much for the presentation. I'm looking forward to a little tour that I've got I think it's this coming week with the superintendent. I think she's calling herself president now, though, if I'm not mistaken. Be that as it may, my question is really for Dave, and that is who on our staff is going to be appointed to this project?
Yeah, it'll be probably the water demand division from the standpoint of water usage. Myself and maybe the water resources division and the district engineer, but our starting point is just trying to get our hands around water usage.
I'm conscious of the things that we have coming up, and I'm very supportive of this. I just am conscious of the
We'll make it
drain on your time. Thank you. So I think first, yes.
Thank you, Chair. Dave, this is completely different from the other letter from the city of Monterey about, so.
But you should know that we've got a letter that was supposed to go out on Friday, it'll be about a week behind, to the Department of Defense, the three different branches here about future needs, which relates to the city of Monterey letter in terms of how much water is available for the future and growth. And so DOD will, and Marlena is kind of coordinating their joint participation in our water allocation process, but we're involved with them at that level as well.
Okay, and when you say Department of Defense, you're going to send a letter to Washington or just local people here?
Just local, yeah.
Yeah, because it gets sent there, no telling when you're going to see it. So,
well, and they interact with their
right
hierarchy.
Let them do that, and then we take care. Thank you.
And Mr. Riley? And then
I just question, where is this expected to be located? On NPS property?
Yes, so I'm Marlena Brown. I'm with Naval Support Activity Monterey. Right now we have 5 different alternatives that we're looking at in terms of analysis. However, the preferred alternative is located, there's a parking lot area that you can see from Del Monte Avenue, and you can see the back of the Del Monte Hotel. It's in that general area as the preferred alternative.
Okay, thanks.
And my question is about timing. Maybe it's too early, but what's the approximate time horizon? This would be, it may be too soon to say, but what can you tell us?
Well, as evidenced by Ordinance 187, that we were very grateful you passed, the military construction process can be very lengthy.
Yeah.
So we have to get through the environmental process first, and we're anticipating that portion in the analysis. Final draft will be ready in summer of 24. So we'll get there first, and then we'll continue on with the MilCon process.
thank you. Yes, Ms. Anderson.
Thank you. I'm curious about
the activities that will be there? Will they be replacing, is this a new building that's going to be replacing activities that currently exist in other buildings that will be removed or repurposed, or is this all new stuff?
So this is going to be a new state-of-the-art facility. It will complement an additional modernization project that we have going over the course of the next 10 years. But this additional building will be for innovation purposes and has been chosen to be in Monterey because the Secretary of the Navy recognizes our proximity to industry leadership and allied partners and the strong academic community that we have here. So it will be a new building.
So that also means a whole lot of new staff, employees there.
So right now we're anticipating that there'll be at least 65 existing staff that will move from current facilities into this new building, and around 100, give or take, visiting staff and researchers that will be using the building.
The actual numbers, so we know people increases.
Right.
I know it's going to take a long time.
Right, and that is part of the analysis. Right now, those numbers are pretty low.
And just very briefly, it sounds very exciting. I know that there's a no action alternative. I mean, honestly, do you, in your projection so far, do you see that as not being a worry that it will be an action as opposed to a no action alternative?
That's what the analysis is for, is to determine what the best way forward will be.
But no sense now at this point moving forward. You have to wait, I guess.
Yeah, I think that's probably
right.
fair.
Understood. That's fair. Thank you.
Done or not? Thinking all of them relating to environmental reporting, I've had no action. But you said 2024, summer 2024.
The environmental documents are slated to be finalized in summer of 24. Construction is a separate process.
So just another quick question. So if I wanted to convert the positions that you're talking about into new positions, new jobs for our area, would you say it should be about 125 at this point, the way that you're looking at it?
You know, let me get back to you on the kinds of positions, if they're temporary or permanent. I will reach back to our NEPA staff on that.
Good, thank you very much.
I understand temporary, visiting professors for a term or terms, but switching out. So, but
I would think there still will have to be administrative staff to go along with all of
and
that.
that's built into the 65. We're estimating about 65 existing staff that will transfer over to that building.
Great, good. Thank you very much for the presentation. Any other questions or comments?
they'll be doing stuff we never get to see.
There for the record.
That's what they said about flying cars. They were actually doing research at MPS on those some years ago. Thank you so much.
Thank you.
Okay.
And the last item we have, next slide. Pure Water Monterey expansion. This is a very difficult to read slide, but you have it in front of you. The little red arrows would zoom in with the button clicks, but they luckily don't cover up any of the text like the big blue blob on that other one. So where you can see where we are today, which is the first red arrow, and where we're headed, which is actually the little circled kind of last piece, and that's really, we're looking at August of 2025. But then final shakedown and so forth, that last red arrow shows, basically the end of third quarter, beginning of fourth quarter of 2025. So that's your 24-month build out for the pure water expansion. And next slide. I wanted to bring your attention to, so I guess I had 4 items. To the Hastings Natural History Reservation, you may recall that this board approved on the UC Berkeley. So there's been a lot of bequests of ranches and open space and so forth to the UC Berkeley system. The one that we have is right off of Carmel Valley Road up by Finch Creek, heading towards Tassajara and that area. Finch Creek is a primary tributary to Kashawa Creek, and there's a concrete ford in the creek that you drive across to get into the reserve. It was identified as the 6th biggest barrier to fish migration in a report that we did back off a grant from 2014. Removal of the barrier would add more habitat, and you approved $100,000 for design and permitting. They went through about $92,000 on that purpose, and you authorized, or previous board authorized, the remainder going to construction. So the whole $100,000 went out. Waterways Consulting, Resource Conservation District, even Trout Unlimited have been involved. Next slide. So this is Jen, the UC Berkeley executive director of the reserve on the left, and Bev Cheney, our fisheries biologist, on the right. And they are standing on the ford in the middle of the creek. So you can see how fords work. You know, the creek flows over it. In high flow, the fish can swim over it and so forth. They began rescuing fish from the site. We got about 1,100 fish a couple weeks ago and began dewatering on the 24th. Next slide. And we'll show you some more photos, but they've excavated for the footings and the wing walls and so forth. This week, actually, they're putting in the forms for the verticals, and they'll begin backfilling the excavations and then add basically the ramps, you know, the approaches and so forth. And the whole thing should be wrapped up middle of November. And then finally, the last slide. Here's some photos. You can see how much water is in the pit, which is why they have to dewater. They're vague. Actually, you can see in the first photo and the bottom left photo, well, you can't see it in the bottom left photo, but there is a pipe for dewatering. Then they came in upper right, and they poured a rough foundation. Then on top of it, they set forms. You can see them setting rebar in the forms and vertically. And they put in that footing, and then now they're doing the wing walls up. So nice piece of work, all initiated and facilitated by the district's first 100,000, which shamed the UC system into putting money in to get this done. So it's looking great. So anyway, that's it for my update. We can move on to the business of the district.
Thank you. If we have questions, yes.
Yes, Madam Chair. Dave, we are going to do a water assessment, the city of Monterey.
Yep.
Could you tell us a little bit more about that? Is that going to be a district-wide report? And would we need anything from the other cities? So once that report is done, everybody that needs to go out to each city,
Yeah.
well, and I guess the military too.
Yeah, we're treating them differently. So the airport, Navy, Army, Coast Guard will be receiving letters sometime, hopefully this week. Certainly no more than 2 weeks, because we have to get them done and out. Because their needs are different. The drivers are different than the cities. In the cities, we have enough information to develop forecasts for them. And so this is basically an update to the supply and demand forecast effort using both population and housing and the differences between the two to kind of focus in on what the needs are. Yeah, I can tell you and we've talked about this almost ad nauseum, but some cities believe they're going to build housing faster than will actually happen. So I would imagine that the allocation process will need to accommodate some of that optimism for certain cities and maybe less so for others. But We're going to give our basic presentation to the Water Demand Committee October 2nd, I think it is. Yeah. So we won't have a completed supply and demand update, but we'll have kind of the framework ready to present.
Thank you.
Yeah.
Thanks very much. Are there any other questions from the board?
I just had one.
Yes.
On the slide on item number 5.
Yep.
And it's very helpful to have the California American Water representatives here today to provide some context about what was happening with a number of the wells and what's going to be happening moving forward, though we still have a shortfall. You thought it was about 300. You're estimating between 300 and 400.
For the final month?
Yeah.
Yeah, probably. Yeah.
Shortfall, you know, from.
Yeah. So originally I thought we utilized maybe 900 acre feet of ASR. It looks like it may be less, but it's still going to be several, you know, probably 6 or 7.
The issue originally said 700 and I said 900.
Yeah. Okay. So that's.
It is where it's targeting based on.
Yeah.
I guess the question here, and this is maybe too complicated to answer as a quickie, so maybe we could take it offline, but I'm just trying to understand where are the redundancies, all of these challenges, electrical challenges and other challenges to the various wells, you know, where are the redundancies in place before those things happen that could have maximized our water usage?
Yeah, I think that's the message that Tim O'Halloran is trying to get across, is that your ability to use Carmel River water, not just for ASR in the winter, but just to meet demand, relies on the number of wells that are operable in the Carmel Valley. And so Cypress Well with the electrical problems and so forth, you know, Pierce was out during the spring season. The rehabs are expected to come online by the end of the calendar year. It would have been nice if they'd come online earlier, but you know, if everything that we just heard is true, we won't be having this conversation again, perhaps a year from now. So that's the goal, is to get the redundant capacity. There's still going to be some issues in the, you know, here locally in the north part, the Seaside Basin for production wells, but they'll be able to get more out. We just won't be unfettered on the injection side, having 3 and 4 available for next season. But yeah, it's redundancy is the key, and there hasn't been any.
Any other questions or comments from the board? Yes.
One question. Thank you. How much, thank you for coming and giving us more information. It's very, we appreciate that. How much of a problem is the disruptions caused by electricity problems? How much of the problem has that been? Big, small?
Yeah, I think that the Cypress well is a one-off, but it's an example of anything can happen. You know, I would say 2 years ago or 3 years ago, electrical outages was a significant issue. As you've seen probably in the rates cases, we've done a lot of work on generators and automatic transfer switches. So before you have a heavy storm in the middle of the night, we'd be sending out a lot of people to move generators, turn on wells. We had limited number of generators. It was a big issue, but we've had, I'm not sure the exact number, is probably like 10 or more generators that we've installed in various locations just in the last couple of years. Not only for, storms or PG&E fluctuations, but particularly that the turnoffs that PG&E would do for power saving needs during the summertime, where it could be up to 5 days. So a lot of that is preparedness on that side, but we're seeing the benefits of that now for power. So power is one item. That's just one example. It's less of an issue now than it was in the past, but certainly when you have these significant drops in voltage at one well site that you see reoccurring over and over in the last couple of months, that has been a big issue. So they need to resolve that as soon as possible. And we're pushing for that.
So the company is talking with PG&E about that?
Yeah, so we've been talking with our rep at PG&E. We had power loggers on the well site showing the drop in voltage and the significant rise in current amps. So PG&E then said we need to put on our own data loggers. They put those on for a couple of days, didn't see anything, said it's not an issue. We said, no, it is. Look at ours. And by the way, you need to pay for our equipment that's been lost. So we're moving it up the chain to make sure it gets addressed as soon as possible because, yeah, this equipment is hard to get. It has a long lead time and there's been a lot of scrambling.
It's like the GM intermittent windshield wiper problem. It was the biggest joke back in the 80s. The intermittent windshield wipers only worked intermittently. And if you brought it in after a rainstorm, your wipers didn't go on, they would try it. And of course, it worked. And they said, we can't fix it unless we see it not work. And you just know they're laughing because everybody knew they didn't work. It's intermittent.
That point's an interesting one because what our data loggers were showing was kind of on 15-minute increments and they did 10-minute increments too. So when you have that variable, it doesn't always show up. So we're trying to push that forward as quickly as possible.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you.
And on the generator issue, the last 3 rate cases, we've actually come out in favor of more generators. And 2 rate cases ago, they dialed the company back on the number of generators. And we're like, that's irresponsible. They need more generators. So it's good they're doing it.
Any other questions or comments? Any member of the public wish to ask questions or make comments on these items that were brought forward today?
Tom Rowley has his hand raised.
Miss you, Tom.
Howdy. Hello, can you hear me?
Yes, we can.
Yes, this is Tom Rowley, Vice President, MPTA. Sorry I couldn't be there tonight. I just wanted to address one thing for particularly the new members on the board there this evening. 2019, October, Mr. Stolt indicated that you certified the financial arrangements. Having sat through the hearing that was held at Embassy Suites, the entire hearing, I recall a different story that about half of the participants that spoke during the public comments said the estimate that was prepared by the Water Management District's consultants, I believe it was Raftellus, it might have been somebody else, were about 100% off or 50% off. That CalAM's estimate of value was in the billion-dollar range for the cost of what was being talked about on the CalAM system. What the Raftellus or whatever the projection that was presented by Mr. Stolt was about half of that. And it was laughable for those of us that were sitting there watching these presentations. I would like to suggest that the directors, especially that were either new back in 2019, or the mayor, or Mr. Eisenhart, that were not on the board, take a look and watch the tape for that hearing that was held at the Embassy Suites. That's one of the reasons why MPTA believes that the whole process you're working on is based on a fallacy of a misstatement of values. And your whole house of cards falls apart because you do not have a sound value that you offered CalAM Water. One of the reasons, I'm sure that's not the reason they turned it down, because they've indicated that the water company is not for sale. So I would urge those new directors to go back and watch the tape of that hearing at Embassy Suites. And I believe you'll come to the same conclusion, we at the Taxpayers Association, that this whole process is built on a house of financial cards. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Mr. Raleigh. Are there any other hands raised?
We have a phone caller,
And the number is?
3840312.
Okay, 0312.
Yes, good evening. Margaret Ann Coppernoll speaking. I just would like to set the record straight because of all the misinformation out there about the eminent domain buyout. First, Monterey Peninsula Water Management District absolutely has the legal right to buy out CalAM per Measure J voter mandate. Second, 2 professional expert studies found the buyout feasible, as did LAFCO staff in its recommendation to approve the district's latent powers. Third, Monterey Peninsula Water Management District has operated as a retail water purveyor for many years and does not require LAFCO approval to proceed. The district appeared before LAFCO out of courtesy, not requirement. Fourth, there was no timeline or buyout budget for the buyout. This process has taken more time due to careful planning and examination of the facts. But CalAM's obstructionist actions have also delayed the process. Fifth, the buyout became the only and necessary option due to CalAM's price gouging, mismanagement, and unethical practices. Ratepayers who conserve water were penalized with charges for the water they did not use, adding to already high water costs. CalAM has overpumped the Carmel River, caused adjudication of the Seaside Basin, invaded another water jurisdiction, acquired out-of-area water companies, charging those costs to ratepayers, and limited capture of floodwater flow to the Aqua Storage and Recovery Project because it continues to use 2 ASR injection wells as extraction wells for Pure Water Monterey instead of building the needed wells. Most recently, CalAM chose to hold the peninsula's urgently needed new water supply hostage, refusing to sign a water purchase agreement for the expansion of Pure Water Monterey that could end the CDO and allow new water hookups. Monterey Peninsula Water Management District deserves our gratitude for its responsiveness to the voters' mandate in Measure J and its productive results for the peninsula's water supply and future water security. Thank you very much. Appreciate all your hard work. God bless you all.
Thank you, Ms. Copernall. Are there any other hands raised?
Susan Schiavone.
Thank you. Good evening. I am looking forward to October the 10th. I am just going to voice my support again. I have no doubt that the district's professional analysis have made an appropriate offer to CalAM for their water system. And we know that the final cost will be determined through a jury trial. And I do know that the district is also anticipating that and has taken that into account in terms of what you're doing for this effort. I'm very happy that we've gotten to this point. I thank all of you very, very much for the hard work you have done and the exceptional analysis of this situation that I've begun reading in the packet for the meeting. And I just want to say I appreciate you very much, and I'm looking forward to moving forward. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Are there any other hands raised?
Tammy Jennings.
Thank you.
Yes, this is Tammy Jennings, and I just wanted to applaud all of you for the work that you've done. Can you hear me okay?
Yes, we can hear you just fine. Thank you.
Applaud you for all the work that you've done. And I am also glad that we're at this point, and I agree with everything that Margaret just said and Susan said, and just want you to know that I am all for this, and I applaud everybody that has worked on this, and God bless you all. Thank you.
Thank you, Ms. Jennings.
We have Melody Chrislock.
Melody, you're up.
Melody Chrislock, Public Water Now. I feel like I should say thank you for the 24,000 voters whose request, whose mandate you have so beautifully carried out to this point. Really, you guys are such an inspiration for a public agency that works in the real interest of the community they serve. It's great, and thank you so much. So I wanted to point out one thing I would encourage Mr. Raleigh to reread the feasibility study. I think he missed the point that CalAm's $1 billion figure included a completed and fully functional desal plant, which is not there. So you couldn't very well make an offer on a desal plant that didn't exist. Therefore, the $1 billion was a bogus figure to begin with. There were also, I think, there were some water rights and some other things in that $1 billion that weren't actually accurate. Anyway, yes, I think, we'll see what a jury says it's worth, but $1 billion is pretty much ridiculous. So thanks again, and I'm looking forward to October 10th.
Thank you, Ms. Krislaw.
Michael Bear.
Mr. Bear.
Good evening, everybody. I want to echo the sentiments of the last three speakers. Job, and it's been a long road. Also want to wish you good luck on Thursday at the LAFCO hearing. LAFCO. Funny, isn't it? That's the name of the company. I'm glad we finally get our day in court. I'll just leave it at that. That was horrendous process. I was outraged by that process. And so I'm really grateful that you pursued litigation, and good luck on Thursday for the LAFCO fiasco. And,
Thank you.
And
You're still on.
So, oh no, I've muted him by mistake. So if you're still on, Mr. Bear, I'll allow you to talk.
Did you hear us, Michael? We're still with you if you want to continue talking.
oh yeah, sorry, I had to unmute myself again. Thank you.
Okay.
I was talking. But anyway, shifting, the hearing's coming up on October 10th, and I'm just going to jump ahead a couple steps and say, is that the end of public involvement in this whole process? That's my question. And so what if CalAm down the road were to make a settlement offer? Would you engage the public input on that? And it's down the road, so it doesn't need an answer now, but I'm thinking about it because what's the word? Speculation. Anyway, I just think you'd want to hear how the public feels about accepting.
Oh. Right. Oh. Okay.
I think you had his 3 minutes, Chair.
Yeah, he did.
Michael, we're having some technical difficulties here.
You can go ahead and talk again. I apologize.
I don't want to take up much of your time. I'll try and make it as fast as possible. Just, that the public will continue to weigh in the process ahead. Assuming eminent domain goes forward, I'm going to just assume that as a hypothetical could happen, that we continue to be involved in future decisions, like if there was a settlement agreement or something like that, that we could weigh in before any major decision occurred. Thank you, and good luck the rest of this month and next.
Thank you very much for your comments. Are there any other hands raised?
Anna Thompson.
Ms. Thompson.
Yes, hello. Thank you for all of your work. Wonderful job. I appreciate it very much. I just wanted to say that I strongly believe that no corporation should ever be allowed to own or manage an essential resource or infrastructure like a water supply and delivery systems. A for-profit corporation's primary objective is to maximize returns for its shareholders and let the ratepayers assume all costs and risks. Since the corporation is guaranteed a high rate of return on its investment regardless of performance, there is no incentive for the company to do a total cost-benefit analysis, make objective assessments of all risks and liabilities associated with any project. CalAm has owned the delivery system, the water delivery system for over 50 years now. And the only thing they have given us is a high cost of the service and obstructing any project that would have given us all the water that we need, and like the expansion of the Pure Water Monterey has obstructed everything always and has provided no new sources of water, has only created problems for us. So I'm looking forward to October 10th, and I'm so happy that you're proceeding with this. I hope you will be proceeding for this purchase, because we cannot afford to keep Cal-Am. We're paying for so much, even new acquisitions that they make. Our rates go up, and they pay a high price too for those purchases. I don't know, we don't have anything to gain by keeping Cal-Am. We have a lot to lose instead. So please proceed with it. I think I'm so grateful for all your work. Thank you so much.
Thank you, Ms. Thompson. Are there other hands?
Tom Raleigh?
He's
I
already
believe we've already
commented
heard
on-
from Mr. Raleigh. Are there any other speakers?
Okay.
Okay. That's it. Are there any other comments from people in the chambers? Okay, seeing none, then we will close this item and move on to item number 7, which is to receive a report from our district council.
Good evening,
Mr.
Madam
Laredo.
The board did meet in closed session on September 7th, and this is the report of that action. The session item was a single topic, and that was to confer with council on one matter of potential anticipated litigation. In that closed session, a single motion was made, and that was to set a public hearing on October 10th. You've heard about that, to consider adoption of the resolution of necessity related to acquisition of Cal-Am's Monterey water system, and also to provide notice of the hearing and a copy of the draft resolution, both to Cal-Am and to the public. The motion was made by Director Edwards and was seconded by Director Paul. It was approved unanimously on a 7 votes in favor, none opposed, none were absent. On going to the next item, update on pending litigation. 3 items I'd like to highlight, and this is very similar to the report I gave to you at your last month. The case concerning Cal-Am's, challenging Cal-Am's EIR for their coastal development permit, that's Marina and Water Management District versus the Coastal Commission. The administrative record is still set to be available for review by the end of next month. With respect to the district's challenge to LAFCO, the hearing on the merits is set for September 21st at 8:30 a.m. in Department 15, as has been mentioned, and that's before Judge Wills. And finally, the action before the Public Utilities Commission concerning Cal-Am's general rate request. The hearing dates on that are set in October 5th and 6th, 9th and 10th, 13th, 16th, 19th, and 20th. We just today got a circulated request that we nominate the amount of time that would be needed to be questioning each witness and the dates that we have available. So Mr. Stoll will have a busy time in October with respect to those hearings. That concludes my report.
Thank you very much. Are there any members of the board who wish to comment or ask questions on either of his 2 items?
I'll just clarify your last
Yes.
comment about October 5th, 6th, and so on. Which lawsuit was that?
That's before the Public Utilities Commission. That's their Cal-Am's general rate request. It's case A 22-07001.
And then another question. Based on the minutes, there's a reference to as the trying to find which case I'm looking to. Well, Director Edwards asked about Oh, CPUC. Oh, that's what you were just talking. No, the supply and demand review by the PUC. Is that set at all?
No, it is not. We have not heard any word from the Public Utilities Commission on that process at this point.
And then just a quick shorthand for me, resolution of necessity. Is that also a right to take? Is that is that the same phrase that's used interchangeably, or?
The resolution of necessity is your board's discretionary decision to move this matter forward. Then, if there is such a resolution of necessity, there is filed a lawsuit seeking to exercise the power of eminent domain. That goes to the Superior Court. That is a trial before a judge only, and the judge will make a determination as to whether or not the district has the right to take based upon the facts that are put before it. That is step one of a two-part process in eminent domain. If there is the right to take, then the next question goes back to the court, and that is, what is the value of Cal-Am's system that is being acquired, and what are its severance costs? And that would be a trial to the jury, and the jury would make that determination based upon the facts and evidence. So it's a two-part trial. The right to take is a judge's decision. The valuation is a jury's decision.
And the right to take issue is at the end of the resolution of necessity process.
Well, it's really the bench trial.
Okay.
Okay. Your decision, if in the affirmative, to move forward and file an eminent domain proceeding is you in effect saying it's in the public interest, there is public necessity, and we are taking this property. And then the bench determines whether you have that right to take.
But given on the resolution of necessity, if there is a no vote, or if there's less than a supermajority vote, then that ends the process right there. Measure J requires this matter come to your board, but it does not supplant your exercise of discretion.
Understand. Thank you.
So, through the chair, please. So all that information that we have gathered, that's the case right there. All that information from feasibility all the way to now, is that the case?
Not quite, because we are holding a public hearing.
Okay.
And the public, and in particular Cal-Am, has the opportunity to provide evidence in the record for you to consider as well.
So, through the chair, I would be right if I said, we don't have all the evidence right now.
That's correct.
To make a decision.
You are absolutely correct.
Okay, so. Until we hear both sides at that meeting, and then the vote says we have enough. All right, I'm just trying to make sure that, but don't put the horse in front of it. All that information that we have gathered has been presented to us. That's the last part that will be presented to us.
Mr. Edwards, the record stays open until the public hearing is closed and until this board says we are ready to close the record and make a decision based upon that record. So this board could actually ask for more information.
Okay.
And when you get to the bench trial, if that's the direction you want to go, there will be discovery, there will be the rights of entry for visitation and learning more. So there will be the opportunity for new evidence to be entered into this. But that's after
the part before this work.
There you go. Oh, we're gonna catch up. Just through the chair, this is not space to say what we have, what we don't have.
Right.
Okay. So that's what I was trying to get to. This is not the space. We need to wait for the meeting, listen to both sides, and you guys make a determination. Gotcha.
And that has to be by majority vote. Should we choose?
Supermajority vote.
Supermajority, sorry.
You need 5 votes, 5
out of 7
votes in order to have the resolution take effect. I just want to point out, the public hearing is set to begin on October 10th. but it doesn't conclude until you collectively decide that you are ready now to close the hearing, receive no more evidence, and then take it for deliberation.
Thank you. So it most probably will not close on October 10th, but we will have to see how it goes. We'll see, as they always used to
I
say.
believe it's premature to decide that.
I agree as well.
We know when it's going to start.
There's no finish. Okay, thank you. Yes.
Thank you, Madam Chair. Two quick questions. The 6-month deadline that we saw on an earlier PowerPoint, that's not from October 10. That's from whenever and if ever the board votes positively.
That's correct. That is
and
from the date of the vote on the resolution.
And separately, I know Manager Stolt, that you are in conversation with Cal-Am Special Counsel because you are talking about 15, 20, 30 minutes. However, for an oral presentation, have there been any communications about documentary submissions on the part of Cal-Am? And can we expect that?
I would expect it, but there's been no conversations. You may recall the giant notebooks that were received 3 days before a LAFCO hearing, that type of thing.
Okay.
Any other questions or comments from the
Just
board?
one more. Mr. Laredo,
Yes, sir.
I know you mentioned the CPUC supply and demand. Is there anything this board can do to get that supply and demand moved up? If we can't do anything, let's say it. If we can, let's hear it. And
We can make a request, but we have no ability to force their hand, to force their action.
okay.
It is one of the conditions of the Coastal Commission conditional permit. So there's incentive on many parties to get it done.
All right. Thank you.
Thank you. Yes?
Yeah, one
Yes.
question about what you just talked about in terms of producing any documentation. Cal-Am's producing any documentation in the packets we used to get on, Friday before a Monday hearing. Can we request that we get those at least a week ahead of time when they're like that? Because, we could refuse to read them. It's preposterous.
We can make the request,
Let's do
but
it.
our obligation is to hold a fair hearing.
Yeah.
And if Cal-Am chooses to introduce materials before you for the first time at that hearing, they have the right to do so.
And they have a right to expect us to respond within 2 days?
You have an obligation to consider the evidence that's presented to you. So all we know when the hearing will begin.
Mr. Mayor.
Well, I was just going to say that, we need to remain open and say loudly and clearly, our minds remain open, no matter what information we get, no matter the time.
Exactly.
You know what I'm saying? Do we put strengths on anybody's ability to lobby it one way or the other?
Exactly right.
And give one side or the other some type of sway or ability to say we do not treat them fairly because of some arbitrary timeline.
Yeah.
Because we could hear somebody in public comment for 3 minutes that convinced us not to go forward. It's a possibility. And we should just meet and see if that happens.
That's a good way to put it. And I'm going to repeat something I said at the last board meeting, which is I think it's just as you've had, General Counsel has had to explain to the board in several times and in different ways that Measure J directs the board to do one thing. The board also has a legal obligation to exercise its discretion, to hold a fair hearing, to consider all the evidence before it at the time we make our decision. And I just think that's a little bit hard for people to completely, because those two things can appear to be in tension. And we're gonna need you to explain it again to the public.
And And the time and place for that is at the public hearing on the 10th, but we have draft findings that address that. We will emphasize that to you in public so that everyone understands what what the rules of the game are.
Very good.
Thank you. Is there any member of the public who wishes to comment or ask questions on this past item?
I see no hands raised.
Okay, thank you. With that, I'm going to close items number 7 and 8 and move on to item number 9, which is to request comment from our board on any conferences, trips, or meetings that were attended following the rules of AB 1234. Yes,
Madam Chair?
Mr. Riley, I'd be disappointed if you didn't come forward.
Well, the water master, when they do hold a hearing or meeting, there are some good discussions. There were 2 meetings on September 6th. One was the full board, and then after the full board, the special committee on replacement fund met. At the full board meeting, they agreed to get more details on several questions. Okay, so that, and then on the replacement fund committee, those special questions were what might be a more appropriate calculation for the rate that's calculated accounting for overproductions. And I've had an issue with that for a long time. It's been a 3-year campaign of mine. I think I'm close to getting good math, and regardless of what the number is, I just want good math. And they've been using multiple formulas, and then they combine them and call it one. And I'm calling it a fraction here and a fraction there doesn't make up a whole. So I don't like that. Anyway, so they're looking at it. That's all I'm saying. There's progress on that. And the second point is there will be I think it's going to be at the next Water Master meeting, a deeper discussion of what the replacement fund, what's the purpose of the replacement fund. And so all those will be good educational pieces for the full board when the time comes.
Thank you so much for keeping us apprised of this. Yes, Alan.
Thank you, Chair. I listened to the Recycle Water Committee from Monterey One Water. Those things that the GM brought up in this report, they put a project timeline out, and that's good. They also said by August 8 of 25, they should have water going into the ground. So another thing I'd like to do is thank Tyler Williams, the mayor of Monterey. He sits on that board over there as the director. He was trying to push it so we can get it done faster. But these things are in restraints that it can't be done faster. But he's over there pushing to get it done faster as we can to get that water online. So I appreciate him over there pushing. So just want to let you know that. So thank you.
Thank you very much. Any other reports? Nope. Okay, thank you. With that, we will close that item and move on now to our public hearing. This is item number 10, and we're going to consider adoption of the October through December 2023 quarterly water supply strategy and budget.
Exactly. And John Lear will lead this one. I do want to remind our guests that there's no reason for you to stay here if you don't want to, if you'd rather be with your family.
Oh, they need to stay. LM needs to stay. I'm not, we get into the meat now.
And perhaps I should have issued that reminder right before public comment.
Yeah.
Anyway, John, hopefully you're ready.
Yep, I am. Good afternoon or good evening, Chair Adams, members of the board. This is item 10, a public hearing to consider the adoption of the October to December 2023 quarterly water budget. Next slide, please.
Again.
Sarah, are you able to advance it?
Yes, 1 minute, please.
I can share, Sarah.
Yeah, we can just, do what we did earlier and.
There we go.
There she
Thank you.
Oh,
Okay,
yes.
Jonathan.
Thank you. Thank you, Chair. In consideration, we go and we look at the NOAA Climate Prediction Center, and it's telling us that even though we hear sea temperatures of El Nino, their prediction model, at least for the end through this, is not showing us that we're going to have more than equal rainfall. So next slide, please.
And I'm just going to say, has weather forecasting not advanced since the 1940s? Because the entire country's equal chances.
Sarah, I'm going to go ahead and share my screen.
Yeah, I don't think advancing is working on either. So we might as well just
It's, I've got it here.
open it and just advance.
There we go. Go ahead, John.
Okay, yeah, and the third slide, please. So we looked at all of the rules that constrain the quarterly water budget, which are the State Water Resources and Control Board orders 9510 and through the cease and desist order, as well as Rule 160, which the board adopts every year and sets the targets for the Monterey Peninsula Water Resources System. In looking at all those rules and our different sources of water, we have the natural sources of water, which is, as Dave was stating earlier, have gone through many different reductions and have been replaced with water projects. So we have seasonal operations of the different water projects, and we work with what sources are available in the CalAm system, along with project operation schedules and these rules. So for ASR, after injecting this year, the previous storage years, carrying over the storage, and what we've produced this year, I estimate that at the close of the water year, there should be about 2,250 acre feet of ASR water remaining in the Seaside Basin. We decided that we should leave the remainder of that balance in storage for the first quarter of this water year, and then go through, see what type of ASR season we get. And then if we need it in the summer to meet demand, we would talk about that at that quarterly water budget. And of course, December is the first month that our ASR permits open. So if we do receive rainfall and sufficient stream flow, we will commence ASR injection and operations. Table 13 is very similar. If we see the flows thresholds for diverting water under the Table 13 water right, we will do so in December. That again is the first month we're allowed to divert Table 13 waters. And we decided that over the Pure Water Monterey operations, that the amount of water that's injected will be equal to the amount of water that is extracted. So there will be no buildup of any operational reserves during this quarter. And we will talk about those values on the next slide. Slide 5, please. This table, as we show you, it breaks down the source of the water and then the months across the top. We start with the Carmel Valley aquifer. We think that there's going to be no rainfall as predicted. So we are below the threshold in what's called the low flow region, where we're only allowed to use the lower wells in the lower valley to produce water. So we're showing a goal of producing 250, 230, and 230 respectively for October through December of this quarter. This is reflective in CalAm's plans to have 2 of the lower valley wells down for rehab, so they'll be ready next quarter to support ASR operations. The remainder of the water that needs to be met for the community will come out of the Seaside groundwater basin under a couple different sources. The Pure Water Monterey injection is projected to be 300, 330, and 350 for the next few months. And that will then turns out to be the projected recovery out of the Seaside Basin. The remainder of the demand for this system for this quarter will then be met by recovering the native water out of the Seaside Basin, which is listed in this table as the coastal sub areas. So we can see that based on historical demand, we'll need about 910, 750, and close to 700 acre feet for the next 3 months of this quarter to meet the demand in the system. Should the system demand be less, the savings would be realized out of the native water out of the coastal sub areas, and the pumping of that would be less. And so, next slide, please. The recommendation of staff is for the board, should it approve this budget, to adopt it, and for the main system for first quarter of water year 2024. And should it be adopted, district staff will file the correct support documentation at the county. And thus concludes my presentation.
Thank you very much, Jonathan. Are there any questions from the board at this point? Yes, Mr.
Thank you,
Evans?
Chair. Jonathan, if we adopt this and one party failed to act on it, what's the consequences?
I don't know the legal consequences. As far as what we've done is met with and formed these budgets, and they are a plan. They're not. I don't know if Dave, you know any enforcement actions that go with this?
Well, we usually we miss them more than we make them. So they're guidance.
This is a planning document. It's not, there are no enforcement mechanisms built into this process.
Okay, that's this one. The next one would be the same question out there.
Yep.
So, okay, thank you.
And just so you know, we talked earlier about this year, the entire water year being a lower water year in demand than previously and so forth. This quarterly water budget for the first quarter is about 235 acre feet higher than the first quarter of actual use last year. So to John's point about what happens if you come in under, the native groundwater from the Seaside Basin wouldn't be tapped at the same level. So there's entirely that possibility. So once again, you know, we budget at a certain level based on historical averages. Things happen where wells go out and you shift things around and you don't get what you wanted. But as guidance goes, this is, you know, it's about as good as it gets. It's gotten definitely more challenging with pure water coming online and so forth.
Thank you. Yes, Mr. Rutter.
Just a quick question on the Sand City desal. It hasn't been producing up to its projected amount of 300. Is it increasing at all, or is it just kind of stabilized around 250, 230? Or
well, it depends on, let's just say two things. In drought, where you have less freshwater mixing with the saltwater, your brackish water ratio of salts are higher. So you try to process that through that plant, and then your discharge is going to be higher than your waste discharge requirement, your regional board discharge requirements. So you just can't function that way. And then there have been the well issues. You know, it's a saline environment, and you know the screens don't hold as well. And so last time I talked to Tim, that the Sand City replacement well is still coming, but it was behind in the DDW permitting process to other permits. So hopefully we'll see some action on that. But where we're at right now, because it was a wet winter, the source water is meeting the demands, I mean, the requirements of the permit. And so they've been running, we've had 2 or 3 months in a row at over 20 acre feet. So, you know, that's good. I don't think it'll ever do 300 acre feet. And I've told the city of Sand City repeatedly, if you ever allocate more, which they haven't done significant job of allocating their own water to projects. When they exceed, 150, we're going to do a back cast of what their actual usage is, but they'll be capped at what they've demonstrated as regular capacity. They're never going to get 300 on a regular basis. We're not going to allow them to allocate 300 if their performance is 230 or 220. But right now they're still in the, I think, less than 20 acre feet. They just had an allocation for the new Marriott project, but, took them 10 years to allocate 5 acre feet.
Okay.
So continuing on, yes.
Thank
Mr.
you.
Eisenhart.
Thank you, Madam Chair. I have a question, actually, both for you, Jonathan, and our friends from Cal American, because it's the same question. You guys get to think about it here. I'm going to put you, Jonathan, on the spot first. Because this quarter includes a month of ASR injection period, right? It's December 1st. When does it?
No, it does. October, November, December. Yeah, it does.
So because this quarter includes a period of time for ASR injection, first I'll ask you, Jonathan, and then our friends at CalAm the same. Because we're still reeling a little bit about some of the challenges with injection from the last winter. I don't want to bring that up again. It gets me upset. Looking forward and taking into account what we have heard tonight about, some infrastructure improvements or rehabs or other things. First, Jonathan, to you, what impediments do you see reasonably still in place, infrastructure-wise, maintenance-wise, that could impede ASR injection as early as December of this year? And then that's the same question for our friends at CalAm. I'll start with you, Jonathan.
Sure. Thank you. It is true that the more sources you have working in the valley, the higher your success rate will be. The limiting factor for this upcoming water year is going to be the same. If there is enough sources in the valley to reach 13 acre feet of injection at ASR 1 and 2, that we will be capped at that rate for this upcoming season as well, due to the pipelines and the use of ASR 3 and 4 for recovery of pure water Monterey. Should ASR 3 and 4 be available, then the rate of injection, daily injection, would be equal to the extra water that can be pumped out of the valley and above what is needed to meet system demand. And so that historically has been somewhere around 16 to 18 acre feet a day. We would be also limited by the pipeline that carries the water over the hill and down to the ASR 1 and 2 site. That also has a limitation of about 18 acre feet a day. Currently, with the way that the system is being planned to operate this year, the thing that you do get is when the permits of ASR are hit, the thresholds are higher than the threshold for the low flow. So you're allowed to use the additional upstream wells, the upper valley wells as they're called, as sources of water too. So as far as the individual pumping rates of the different wells and the amalgamated pumping rate of what is going to be available, I wouldn't be able to answer that as accurately as CalAm would be able to.
Okay.
Yeah, and just to simplify, John kind of did a hypothetical there. We're not going to have ASR 3 and 4 available. They're going to be needed for production. And as long as, something we can talk about some other time, but as long as revenue recognition is driving how much pure water Monterey is injected and extracted, then you'll never have the Monterey pipeline either. So it's always going to be coming up over the hill through Tehama, down Montera. So those two constraints on this end of the system we just have to assume them in place. At some point, we'll have a conversation about revenue recognition. That being said, then it's all just Carmel Valley well capacity, which Tim and Chris both touched on, but we'll give them their answers.
Explain what you mean by.
Well, Chris has said that well, and John has said, they're trying to match the injection and the extraction, give or take. You know, you may not match 100%, but within a month or two, you're trying to stay, they are trying to stay consistent with what is injected and what is extracted so you can then sell it to the customer. If you don't, you run the risk of falling too far behind and reaching a point, and their fiscal year is different than our fiscal year is different than a water year, but you have to be very careful as a company to two things. One is to not leave water in the ground that has to be booked as an asset in a place where it's not been considered as an asset. It's been booked as, you know, it's supposed to be purchased water with a pass through to the customer. And so they're trying to match 3,500 acre feet to 3,500 acre feet.
I get it.
There are reasons to not do that seasonally and still try to match it in a year. But also when you create the surcharge to cover the purchased water costs, it's based on a number of acre feet. And so if you don't deliver that, then you're out of kilter with what you've said you're going to have in your revenue requirement. So there's a couple of things there that, you know, it's not a system constraint, it's a booking constraint.
Right, but my question was definitely more on a systems constraint or impediment.
Yeah, so quite a number of questions here. Let me see if I can hit all of them. First, I wanted to say appreciated John Lear's summary of the quarterly water budget. We've done this quite a while, and he's very quick with us being on the same page with it. I definitely appreciated all of his points on it and agreed with them. And if I can first hit on, because this relates to it, Director Edwards' comment about, you know, holding to the budget. One of the things that we have to keep in mind is that you start the water year assuming drought. And because that's the worst case scenario, you only have 3376 acre feet now, not the 8310 acre feet from the Carmel River. So you got to assume worst case scenario. And then if the rains occur and you have the ASR triggers, you shift your operations, call up people like John Lear, start coordinating accordingly. So it's a plan, but it's not something that, you know, if this was rigid and you couldn't do anything else, there'd be other challenges along the way with it too. So it's agreed on by NIMS, CDFW, CalAm, Water Management District, and then MOU, but you have to have some flexibility in there too. To your point of this season, this has been a very interesting year in terms of we no longer have the effective diversion limit. We have different kind of constraints under Ordia 9510 with the ASR. And we had an ASR season that pretty much lasted the whole season. There was only part of December where we didn't have it. So we were operating that whole time this last water year. And then we have, because of that ASR season, as Mr. Stoltz mentioned, you have a lot of Carmel River water rights left over that you're trying to maximize there out of Carmel River. Well, what does that mean? That means that we're just basically running our Carmel wells as long as we can, first upper valley and lower valley. And then when the lower valley triggers end, we're just doing lower valley as much pumping as possible. Well, wells reduce production capacity over time. They get clogged, screens get clogged, other things, you need to rehab them. Well, when are we going to rehab these wells? Would it be when you're trying to maximize that Carmel River pumping? Would it be at the start of the ASR season when the average year happens? So we're kind of squeezed in right now where Tim's team is trying to line up drillers to start October right at the end, right at the start of the new water year, and end by December in that 3-month window before the average start of an ASR season that's early January, to get in those 2 rehabs of historically really high producing wells that have gone down over time and need a rehab. So, you know, it's a long-winded way of saying, you know, if we hit an average ASR injection season, we should see that additional capacity hit in January. If it's December, we'll probably still have low production because we're rehabbing a couple of our historically bigger producing wells during that December month, which on average, we don't have ASR, but one year we had December 2nd, a huge storm, if you remember that. So if we get that, we could have lower production for ASR, but we should have in January those rehab wells online to be able to see. March timeframe, February, maybe the Schulte well back online and more production from there. So that's kind of a long-winded way of saying we should have more, but it depends on when we get those river triggers. Or we will have more, but.
Yeah, it just seems a little harrowing to get all of that in time. And then you bring up a good point. And then, you know, almighty, we might have weather, on top of everything else.
Yeah,
Well,
don't
and
get hopes up too much.
he's feeling that in terms of that crunched window, or his engineering project manager is. What are you going to say?
Wait, his shoulders twitching.
Yeah.
Don't get your hopes up too high on December because, unless it starts raining in November, the first rain fills and spills the reservoir. And so this December, we had great rain. We had about a 6-day, maybe a 7-day diversion, but then you didn't meet the in-stream flow requirements because you're waiting for the saturation to happen, so, the first month of rain is spotty.
Yeah, absolutely. A lot of stops and starts. And then the one other thing I'd add is that's kind of on the Carmel River side. On the Seaside Basin side, I mean, I definitely agree. I mean, not assuming, to Tim O'Halloran's point, this land for extraction wells 1 through 4 on, Seaside Middle School site, military site, we're not going to have it for this year. So we're limited to 2 injection sites. And, with 3 and 4, there is the expense concern that Mr. Stoll talks about, but there's also TTHM issues where when you inject chlorinated water into the basin, you need to wait about 6 months to be able to extract. So that gets to be a lot of issues with trying to, have that offset of historic Carmel River water with the pure water Monterey water we need to have available for that. And particularly, if you never know how long that ASR season is going to last. So in our scenarios that we're running, it would be, I haven't seen one yet where, we could wait that 6 months and still have the assurance that we would, be able to confidently meet the Carmel River limit. So we really need those additional extraction wells.
Okay. Thank you.
Any other questions or comments from the board on item number 10? Okay, any comments from the public? No hands are raised. Okay, I'll bring it back to the board then, and we will need to have a motion to adopt the October through December 2023 quarterly water supply strategy and budget.
I second.
Thank you. So we have a motion and a second. And all in favor, please signify by saying aye. Aye. Opposed? Seeing none, abstentions and none. Excellent. So that passes. Thank you, Jonathan, very much. And thank you all for your important input. Now we will go to item number 11, which is to consider adoption of resolution number 2023-14, modifying Rule 160.
Okay, good evening again. And this is public hearing item number 11. To consider adoption of Rule 160, the regulatory targets. So next slide, please. Rule 160 is a rule that the district has that has tables XV1, 2, and 3 that are adopted each year. They are adopted and placed by ordinance into the rule, and those tables are used to set the limits to the Monterey Peninsula Water Resources System, and then utilized in the quarterly water budget process to track and monitor how the water is being produced out of the natural system, and as well as they're used to guide any rationing that's needed to be done should we discover that we're producing water out of the Monterey Peninsula Water Resources System at a rate faster than we've specified. So next slide, please. We have the cease and desist order, and that is limiting production out of the Carmel Valley alluvial aquifer, and we have the adjudication decision, which is limiting production of native water out of the Seaside groundwater basin. We did bring Pure Water Monterey on as a new source in water year 2021, and it will be used to make up the difference between the Rule 160 targets and the demand that we see and we're trying to meet in the quarterly water budget processes. Next slide, please. Thank you. So the numbers for those are, according to the CDO, no more than 3,376 can be pumped out of the Carmel River. and no more than 1,474 can be pumped out of the coastal subareas. There is a 0 acre-feet limit for the Laguna Seca subarea. There is expected to be some pumping in the Laguna Seca subarea, as Hidden Hills is still a system that is not hooked to the main system. The Ryan Ranch system and the Bishop systems have been intertied and will be supplied from the coastal area and or the river with Carmel River and native water and pure water Monterey recovery. So for both sources from the natural system, that gives us 4,850 acre feet. So the way that can we go to the next slide, please? Rule 160 gives a guideline of how you're supposed to allocate your water. So we go through and we can see historically through a period of wet and dry cycle that we use the percentage of water that is on the bottom line per month historically, and we use these percentages to then distribute the natural water throughout the different months of the year. So if we advance to the next slide, we can see that for all of the water we have, the combine of the Carmel Valley alluvium and the Seaside groundwater basin divided up by those percentages, we can see the individual month totals on the left total, and then we can see the cumulative running total on the right. And this rule is used to watch those, and as they're budgeted out, if we are more than a number for a month, we would want to look at that, and we would want to decide if we need to do rationing or any type of slowing down of producing out of that, or substituting production out of the natural system for water supply from a water supply project. And the next slide shows us the Carmel River as its only source, which is another one of the tables that are required to be put into this. And the next slide is our recommendations, is that we adopt these tables, or the board to adopt these tables to modify the regulatory production targets for the CalAM system from the Monterey Peninsula Water Resource System for water year 2024. We will incorporate these tables, should they be adopted, into Rule 160 and replace them in our rules and regulations. And we will also file a notice of exemption for our CEQA compliance at the Monterey County. And this concludes my presentation.
Thank you so much, Jonathan. I'll bring it over to the board and see if there are any questions, comments. Yes, Mr. F.
Thank you, Chair. That same question I asked. Failure to comply or whatever, what happens?
If I may, through the chair.
Yeah.
This is still a planning process. This regulation is built upon the premise that there's going to be cooperation, and there are no penalties that can be imposed for failure to comply. You do not have the discretion by adopting a resolution to impose a penalty resulting from non-compliance. This board does have the authority to do that, but you would have to exercise that differently. You would have to pass an ordinance. You would have to adopt a rule, and it would have to be. It would change this planning concept into a regulatory enforcement, which is a much different process that would require first and second reading, public hearing. You don't have that authority at this time by implementing this.
Okay, my next question. Jim, what committee would that start going through, starting that process?
It'd be the water supply planning.
Okay.
Yeah, my caution would be, the reason it's a planning document or a guidance is, you may have seen John showed, here's the historical, and we take the average of the historical. There was an effort at one point to update the historical so that it wasn't so heavily influenced by past history. And, we went through a drought, but you don't know what the weather's going to be. And so if you have a year that's significantly aberrational, you're not going to meet these. And so, it's hard to try to invoke penalties for failure to comply with a planning document when.
Well, the only reason I say we need to put this in our records, because I don't like people giving me sport alerts that we're gonna pump the Seaside Basin as much as we can, and we still have water in the river. Just to talk upsets me. So let's start. We need to start working on something that we got in place to use. I heard the mayor mention, what are we gonna do at the last board meeting? So I said, what we're gonna do, we're gonna start figuring out how we're gonna do it.
Yep.
And I take your advice more cautiously, but when you give me sport alerts, I don't like them. Okay, so let's agendize that for the water supply so we can get started on it. That's all I have to say on that one.
Thank you. Yes, Ms. Paul.
Thank you. In response to Director Edwards' comment, the way I understand this, it's a planning tool to try to stay in compliance with the regulatory limits. That's the purpose of this plan, as I understand it, this rule, right? So, I mean, the penalties for noncompliance and so on can be imposed by the State Water Board for the cease and desist order, by the court for the Seaside Basin. There are enforcement processes that could be invoked if they were needed. But as I understand it, this is to try to stay in compliance, to see month by month, do we need to adjust course to stay in compliance? And so trying to turn this into an enforcement would change the purpose. And I don't see right now a reason to do that.
But I know what Director Edwards is getting at, and it may not be that this is the right document or the right place. You don't want to look month to month, say, oh, you missed a month. But a repeated inability to use your entire river water right multiple years in a row it's not a good look. So I understand what you're starting with, but there may be a different way to deal with it.
I just say start it at the committee, work it to the board, so everybody will know. Hey, we want to be a water agency, and we are a water agency, but we want to do other things. So, I can't keep with doing what I'm doing. Well, they missed a month. They do that. I got to put all the elements behind it. Enforcement too. That's what we ought to do. So water supply, we need to take it up and discuss it. If it doesn't reach the board, hey, if the board voted down, hey, I'm just going to vote. But we need to put things in place.
Who's the chair? Who's the chairman of the water committee?
Water supply, me.
Okay, well, what I'm saying is, you gotta go put it on your agenda, then we'll see it when you give it to us.
Whatever I do, Mayor, I want the full board to know what is happening.
No,
I don't want them to be surprised. Oh, where did this come from?
No, I got that. It's just, we don't need to go back and forth about whether it's a good idea or not. If it comes out to committee, it comes out of the committee.
I hear you.
This right here, this guy tonight is a guiding tool. Right? So what we talk about is the tool. Let's talk about this tool. The changes. What about tonight?
Thank you very much for your concise way of framing it. So with that, I will, is there any other following questions at all?
I just have a really quick one.
Okay.
Hopefully it's a really quick answer for the GM or for Jonathan. I noticed that for the system-wide allocation, the ratios or the amounts month to month, like increase or decrease based on, I'm assuming, water demand, are exactly the same. I'm not a human calculator, but they really look like the increases and decreases month to month from the Carmel River versus the system-wide allocations they look the same. The ratio looks the same. And my question was simply this. You understand what I'm saying? Based on the total amount for the year, the way it divides up looks exactly month to month.
Should be.
And my question is, don't we want to treat the Carmel River differently than the system-wide, for the reasons we've been talking about earlier this evening. That's all. I know it's only a.
No, the short answer is yes. There's a whole regime that the company'd like to get to, we'd like to get to, where you, in a perfect world scenario, you reduce July, August, September, or June, July, August off the river to 1 MGD just to keep the Begonia iron removal plant working. But first, you have to have a new supply online to make up the shortfalls, and then you have to have the ability to move water by source around seasonally, which has not been completely proven to be easy to do, especially with the desire to take Pure Water Monterey on a monthly basis instead of banking it for a few months.
And I realize
later and things like that.
And I realize this is not strict, it's a guideline, but it just seemed.
Yeah, I mean, if you were to go back to, and I'm not suggesting putting it back up on the screen because you have a copy of it, but if you were to look at the summer months off the Carmel River, there's not a noticeable drop, like a policy level drop.
Right.
Yet. We're just not in that position to being able to do that yet.
Okay. That's it. Thanks, Chair.
Thank you very much. Is there any member of the public who wishes to ask a question, make comments?
I see no hand raised.
Okay, thank you very much. With that, I'll bring it back to the board now. We need to have a motion to adopt resolution number 2023-14, modifying Rule 160, the regulatory water production targets for the California American Water System.
I move.
Thank you. Is there a second? Second. Thank you very much. We have a motion and a second. All in favor, please signify by saying aye. Aye. Any opposed? None. Any abstentions? Okay, with that, we will go on to item number 12, which is the informational items and the staff reports. I noted that we have some correspondence in this. If there are any questions or comments, perhaps General Manager, do you want to make any comments?
No. See a question?
Any questions?
Nope.
Seeing none. Questions? Anything online? No hands raised. With that, then we will close that item and I will look at what Steve Job has to say. I'm going to officially adjourn this meeting at 8:01 p.m.
Thank you.
Thank you very much.